Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, October 13th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. On this episode, we preview the League Championship Series matchups with the benefit of one game already in the bank on the AL side, thanks to Jays Mariners getting underway on Sunday night. We'll talk about how we got there, including a 15-inning marathon in Seattle between the Mariners and Tigers. We're going to preview the NLCS matchup that gets underway on Monday night between the Brewers and the Dodgers. To do that, Dominic Cotroneo will join us here in just a little while, and we will say a final goodbye to the 2025 Cubs. Sahadev Sharma will come talk about what the Cubs offseason might look like in an offseason where Kyle Tucker becomes a free agent, and there are some lingering questions about what happened to that lineup over the course of the year and how they can close the gap on the rest of the NL going into 2026. Eno, let's start with what happened Sunday. The show is going to be in a goofy order because things just don't happen in the way we would like for our lives. Game 1 of the ALCS in the books. Bryce Miller may have changed the complexion of the entire series because coming off of a 15-inning game in which you threw pretty much everybody. We saw Logan Gilbert out of the pen. We saw Luis Castillo out of the pen. Kirby started that game. Of course, we saw Spire. We saw Brash. We saw Munoz. Edward Bizardo was fantastic for 2 2/3. That was the 5th appearance in 5 games in the series for Bizardo. So you get to this point where you win that marathon in Seattle. You have to fly to Toronto on the off day and get ready to start a series against a more rested team and a really good Jays offense, too. And with Bryce Miller, we saw him start a game in Detroit earlier in the ALDS. Expectations, I think, were very reasonable. If Bryce Miller gave them 4 innings, I think they were going to be okay with that. Bryce Miller gave them 6 innings instead. And after giving up a solo homer to George Springer, which made Rogers Center as loud as I've ever heard it on TV, at least since the Jose Bautista bat flip heard around the world. What Miller did, not only setting up to win game 1, but to just give the pitching staff an actual quality day of rest was massive, even beyond the opening game in the series.
Yeah, it was pretty wild, especially the way it started. I mean, he gives up a homer to George Springer at the beginning. I thought he looked nervous. Honestly, I mean, I like the guy, and he was gutsy in the end, so it's great. Somebody pushed back and thought they didn't think he looked nervous, but he had like red eyes and he was like looking around. I think, am I crazy? Like he looked, I mean, I would be nervous. I just gave up a homer to Springer and I know that there's not much in the coffers today. It's like, am I going to wear it? Is this going to be one where I just give up a lot and they leave me out here to die on the vine? Like what is going to happen today? And then he turned around and just gave up, nothing after that and was just really excellent. And I think, this ties into a little bit of our conversation about what a stuff number is good for. He's always had good stuff, but at times strikeout rate issues. And when I look, there's a radial chart on Savant that you can do where it's basically the batter showing the launch angles and exit velocities that are given up, right? And though he gave up some hard contact, what you can see is that almost none of it was in the ideal range, basically barrels. Like he gave up 1 barrel and that was the home run. And then he gave up 3 or 4 hard hit balls that were just not lifted hard enough to be barrels. But what he really did, and this is the Bryce Miller special, is he gave up 7 balls in play that had a 40-degree launch angle or higher.
That's almost a page out of the Andrew Abbott playbook.
Yeah, he's a pop-up guy. I mean, it also makes sense because he's got a fastball with ride, and he's a fastball-heavy guy. I did have a conversation with Steven Sutton Brown about his release points, and his release points are so different. And that's why stuff may overrate Bryce Miller a little bit because it likes the shapes of his secondary pitches, but his release points are so different on all of them. Steven Sutton Brown ran it through his thing, and when the average player throws a fastball, a splitter finger, right? the batter has like a 25% chance of guessing correctly that it was a split finger based on release characteristics. When Bryce Miller throws his splitter, the batter has a 45% chance likelihood of guessing that or seeing that it's a splitter. So there are some things that Bryce Miller's not amazing at, but the one thing he's really amazing at is getting pop-ups with the fastball. And that was on display afterwards. There was some dancing with the raindrops, as you put it, where there were some balls that might have found grass in a different version of the simulation we're in.
Yeah. It wasn't perfect, but by result, by outcome, it was as much as you could have hoped for. I mean, it took him 76 pitches to get 6 innings. That is incredible efficiency. You just can't even script it better than that, given the regular season that he had. He had the bone chips in his arm, 5.68 ERA, 141 whip during the regular season. If you're a Mariners fan, you're going into game one thinking, oh boy, if we win this in a slugfest, given all the circumstances, we're lucky to get out of there with some kind of like ugly 8-7 sort of win. And nope, Bryce Miller came through and had his the most important start of his big league career up to this point.
Fastball command was amazing. He had, I'm just like sort of guesstimating right now, but I'm looking at his pitch chart, and I would say there's about 15 or 16 fastballs that are along the black at the top of the zone and the corners at the top. I mean, just really excellent fastball command. And that's the other thing that he said that he didn't have when he was struggling with the injury. Mm-hmm. And he got it back. So that was a really great performance. And, afterwards, Vlad Guerrero said, we didn't hit. And that was the story of that game. But it was a fun game. It just sort of lost steam at the end a little bit.
Well, I mean, Cal Raleigh tied the game with a homer in the 6th. I saw a new nickname for him. It's not new. Well, it's new to me. I don't think it's brand new. Lookout Landing called him the Sultan of Squat. Well, yeah, that's another good one. So
I really like that he's powering through the kind of season that he had. He would be totally fine if he had some fatigue issues and slowed down a little bit, but he has not slowed down, and he seems lovable, dude. He seems like kind of huggable somehow.
Yeah, they could make some giant Cal Raleigh teddy bears, and I imagine they'd sell pretty well around Seattle. So the Jays ended up using a lot of relievers, 5 relievers to cover the final 3 1/3 innings of this game. Kevin Gausman, his pitch count was in pretty good shape. They had an opportunity to leave him out there if they wanted to, but it was the 3rd time through the order, so they went ahead and they went to the pen, and it didn't quite work the way they'd hoped. And as I look at that Jays bullpen, like there's a few guys in there that are a little underrated. Mason Fluharty might be really important for them throughout the series. He got out of a jam, struck out Eugenio Suarez in a matchup in which he was giving up the platoon advantage. Suarez narrowly missed a homer a little earlier in that game off the top of the high wall in right center field. I look at Sir Anthony Dominguez. I'm like, he's important for them. But one thing the Mariners did that teams did to Sir Anthony Dominguez during the regular season, Randy Arozarena got on base and stole 2nd and 3rd against Sir Anthony Dominguez. And I had to look it up because I wasn't sure, but sure enough, 19 stolen bases allowed by Sir Anthony Dominguez during the regular season this year in 62 2/3 innings. If you pace that out to a typical starter's workload, that would be among the league leaders. So he's one of the easier pitchers in the league to run on. And I think anytime the Mariners have someone that can steal bases on against him, they are going to give that player a green light. And we saw it already in game 1.
Yeah, there is a weakness for this bullpen, and they had the 2nd worst velo in baseball out of the bullpen in September. So post trade deadline, I mean, not very good at all. 91.5 miles an hour on the 4-seam out of the bullpen in September. And when you're facing fastballs under 93 miles an hour, the slugging, kind of it goes up for Seattle. The slugging on those pitches was .461 this year with a .336 OBP on fastballs under 93 miles an hour. So, I think that's a matchup that matters. And they did okay in this first game, but to go to that and lose, that was the A bullpen. We've been talking about this all postseason. It was a look. It was the first look.
First of many, I imagine. And like Gabe Spire is one of those guys that got into this game on the other side. And you think, oh, well, even though you only used 3 relievers and used your 3 A relievers in Seattle, look, we'll see if that adds up over the course of the series, if the Jays bats could take advantage of that. I mean, we saw Kerry Carpenter homer in Game 5 of the ALDS off of Spire, which lefty homer for Carpenter is pretty rare. But it was pretty efficient work by all of the Mariners relievers. 8 pitches each for Spire, Brash, and Munoz to get through the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings. So they didn't get that much of a look, even though they were out there for an inning apiece.
Amazingly, 8 fastballs, which is only 33%, but is more than they'd been throwing they threw in that long, like in the long Game 5 with the Tigers. It was, you thought they would never throw a fastball again.
We'll get to that game here in just a minute. I know we had the free sneak peek. It's a Waffle opportunity for you, seeing that the Mariners have one in the bank on the road, no less. Any alterations to your expectations for the series? The Game 2 pitching matchup we learned is Logan Gilbert versus Trey Yesavage.
I've lost track of my various predictions. So,
because you picked everybody on a different platform, so now you don't know who you actually picked on the show.
Which one did I do here? I said Mariners in 6 on the website.
Okay. Well, that was prior to the start of the series, so we'll count that as your most recent official prediction, even if you had previously said Blue Jays on the pod.
Did I? Oh,
I think you did.
Oh, man. Don't go to the tape.
Don't go to the tape. No, never go to the tape.
I think this was really important because this was one that you would circle for the Blue Jays.
Yeah.
And, Trey Yesavage is great. And so maybe, the one you circle for the Mariners, which is, Logan Gilbert's start, maybe Yesavage and the Blue Jays sneak that one out and it's still a long series. But Brian Woo's on this roster, and at some point he's going to pitch. And Kirby looked great. Again, I'm referencing the game that we will talk about in a second. But I still see like this did flip. I mean, it does matter in terms of what you expect in a given series going forward. Who wins Game 1? It is important, and to win Game 1 on the road, I think. Is important. And then to do it without one of your 2 or 3 best starters is another thing. So I think it leans Seattle's way.
Yeah, I had Seattle in 6 at the beginning. That's where I'm going to stay with this one. I have no reason to change it coming off of it for all the reasons.
I just stole your prediction for the website then.
Well, yeah, you might have. I'm very persuasive. I think there's something you pointed out about Trey Yesavage, though, that makes facing him in Toronto a little bit more difficult, right? As a road team, you don't have the trajectory machine. And when you have a pitcher that's unusual, and Trey Yesavage is definitely unusual, or unique is probably the nicer word to use in this case, then I think that puts a little extra pressure on your bats, right?
Here's some early evidence from a student, Dylan Tovitz, who sent me these findings that he'd looked into after he'd heard on our pod us talking about the possible implications of the traject machine. I think at this point maybe 28 teams have traject machines, which are these high-tech machines, hitting machines that can mimic the release points and basically have almost like a hologram of the pitcher releasing the ball. And on the left, what you see is the home and away gap in strikeouts for players, and then in particular DHs. And I think a DH could go in between innings and be on the traject downstairs or in the hitting well and then come out. So I think it does make some sense that the DH might be different than the whole population. What you see is over the course of the last 7 seasons, the DH has gone from whiffing more often at home, which is weird, but may have something to do with the order in which people hit at home. He sits and then he has to hit, and he doesn't get to play on the field, right? The DH. And so maybe that's why he would whiff more at home than on the road, where he gets to just go out there and hit. In any case, over the last few years, DHs have gone from whiffing more at home to whiffing less than the general population at home with regards to himself. You know what I mean? Like this, am I making the point? Like the split between home and away strikeouts. DHs have like become more normal and in fact surpassed the regular population and whiff a lot less at home. And I think that could be the trajectory machine impact. The other one is a look at arm angles, and it shows that the most extreme arm angles have a home strikeout split. Now, he said that the N is not large. You can see that from the graph itself, that, of course, how many Trey Yesavages are there? How many Tyler Rogers are there? But the early evidence here is that those types of pitchers are better at home, get more whiffs at home, when the opposing team doesn't have access to a trajectory machine. So a little bit of evidence. This is the type of research that you'd have to do to kind of show the impact of the trajectory machine. Trey Yesavage's excellent playoff debut against the Yankees was at home, and game 2 is at home. So the Mariners will just have to do it old school, where they just get into the box and see it, and maybe spend the first inning or two just letting pitches go by so they can even time it and see what it looks like.
I just want to know who on the staff has to try to mimic Yesavage's release. Like that's what I want to know. Or if they've just found something.
They called Josh Coleman and were like, "Hey, can you come back?
we need you. We need you here.
Can you throw BP for us? We'll give you $5,000."
Hey, it's good work if you can get it. All that axe throwing for Josh Coleman paying off yet again if they do in fact go that route. But this is the main reason why I have insisted for a long time that if you are the Colorado Rockies, you want to have a semi-truck driving around the country, being prepared at your road games for your hitters to use a trajectory machine somewhere adjacent to the stadium. It will be ridiculous, but I think it is a path to getting better results, having to go in and out of Coors Field.
Could you have a hitting well that was all in the truck?
Maybe. Probably. I mean, I'm the wrong person to completely solve it.
Walk up into the truck.
I'm a believer. Like, I think you can find a way to make this work. I think you can do a lot. Like, I think a lot about the mobile home and you take that and the RV and you kind of combine the concepts of what NASCAR does, hauling cars
mobile
all over.
Trajectory hitting well. I love it. It would be so funny too if you're standing outside it. It would sound really interesting. Like thwack, thud, thud, thwack, thud, thwack, thud.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, one more question for you before we get to the NL side. Did you enjoy the Mariners-Tigers grueling Game 5 matchup in the ALDS? And I ask you as a neutral, like you didn't have a rooting interest, so your heart wasn't beating out of your chest every inning for several hours. It was so
much fun, dude.
Yeah,
I mean, Tarek Skubal is roaring, dude. I mean, there's spittle flying, like it's, I don't know, man. And George Kirby was, everybody. It was masterful pitching. It was just really beautiful pitching, and just enough traffic that you didn't get that. Sometimes, and I love pitching, sometimes you can get in a pitching duel where you're kind of like, okay, we haven't had a hit in like 5 innings. It's a little bit boring. It was not quite that level. You still had base runners. You still had like drama. You still had a guy on second. Is something going to happen here? And the Mariners just kept pushing and kept pushing. And eventually got to the point where, bases loaded, it didn't even have to be the hit that it was from Jorge Polanco to finish it. So it kind of felt, at that point, it felt like, yes, the Mariners are going to win this game. But before that moment, it just, I don't know, it felt like it could go on forever.
I mentioned the Carpenter homer off Spire earlier. That put the Tigers up 2-1. At that point in the evening, it kind of felt like it was all unraveling for the Mariners. Like that might be enough. There were great pitching performances all around. Bizzardo was great. Will Vest was phenomenal. I I've come to the point where I've accepted that I underrated Will Vest all season, even though I wasn't effusive in my praise of the Tigers' bullpen as a whole or the moves they made at the deadline. Will Vest was a legitimately good story in that Detroit bullpen all year, and he showed up in the postseason.
Yeah, and his list of transactions is interesting because I think he was a Seattle Mariners infielder.
He's a converted infielder.
Yeah.
I knew he was a Rule 5 pick. I didn't know he was a converted infielder.
Let's see. We have to go way back when Seattle. Do they have him listed? They have him listed. Okay, so maybe he converted as as a reliever in the Mariners system because they always have him listed as a reliever. And that designation didn't change. But yes, in 2021, Seattle Mariners designate Will Vest for assignment, and the Tigers claimed him, but then returned him to the Mariners.
Rule 5.
Yeah.
Vest was a light-hitting shortstop in college. Cody Stavenhagen had a great profile. So he converted to pitching in college.
Okay. Yeah, it took him a while. I mean, even after they claimed him, it took him a while to be this Will Vest. That was in 2021. And, since that time, he's put on some velo. He kind of went from 93.5 in 2021 with Seattle to 96.7 this year with Detroit. He added some pitches. The sinker, I think, was a big one for him to just play the two fastballs off of each other. And, he's the kind of guy that this is the first year he's had above average stuff plus. And I think a lot of it has to do with playing those two fastballs off each other, but he's always had excellent command. And it's a slightly different profile than you normally get from a late inning reliever. But the stuff has finally risen to meet his role.
Yeah, but I think we could put that Game 5 in the instant classic bin. Saw a lot of folks putting
put that box
label on it. Oh, the pitching line again?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the pitching lines were absurd. And Skubal actually matched his personal high, at least in a playoff game. 26 swinging strikes, 13 Ks, no walks, 6 innings of 1-run ball. I mean,
two hard hit balls.
Everything you could want from Skubal in terms of dominance. And I think they had talked about, he was just out of gas before the 7th, so they didn't want to bring him back out again. So that's why they turned it over to the bullpen when they did.
I mean, his last
pushing
pitch
him
was
20
like
more pitches
or 101 or something. It was crazy.
He still had the velo, but I think they did have a conversation about it as far as continuing to push him, and they made their decision. And that's not the reason why they lost. It was just one of those games that was that close. And
Jack Flaherty, I love just reading through this line because I'm just remembering the game better, And Jack Flaherty was talking to himself.
Yeah. Did anybody ever figure out what he was talking about or what he was saying?
I don't know, man. It looked crazy. It looked totally crazy, but he didn't quite have the command, and that's sort of when it started to unravel a little bit.
Yeah, and we saw a few double plays and just a few jams that these teams worked out of. So you're right. We had that tension throughout those late innings. Longest elimination game we've ever seen in baseball history. So
and the Mariners just really, went for it on just to every pitcher they had. I mean, Logan Gilbert throws 2 innings, and then Luis Castillo finishes it out. There was a lot of people saying, well, they've got nothing left. Like, who's going to pitch the next game? And that's true. Like Bryce Miller had to pitch on short rest. But what do you do if you're Seattle? You have to win the game.
You had to win the game, and you also couldn't bank on 6 or 7 relievers all getting appearances, because then you're taking the fatigue that you might have had carried over and you're just locking it in for another series. That was the thing they had to avoid, and Bryce Miller helped them do that. But to answer the question on the Cryon on the rundown, yes, I did enjoy Game 5. Sorry,
we were
Tigers
shouting.
fans.
We had the boys over for some IPAs, and
did they make it all the way to the end?
No, they didn't. I did though. I made it. They all had flights in the morning and kids to pick up.
Well,
so I was all alone in the front room just yelling.
Well, you're in the right time zone for it to even been possible to make it to the end. I feel for Tigers fans that stayed up all the way through and it had it in that way. I heard the story of Dan Dickerson, the Tigers radio announcer. During the commercial break, his mic was still on, and he didn't want to do the post-game show because, understandably, he was frustrated. I mean, if you are a team announcer, you feel the highs and lows, and especially the biggest low at the end of the season. He apologized for what he said. He dropped an F-bomb, but I feel like it's only going to endear him more to Tigers fans, like in the grand scheme of things. Like Dan Dickerson, I think, is held in very high regard as a radio announcer. I caught some of his calls at various points throughout the postseason.
What did he say? Like, F this, I'm out of here or something?
He was like, oh, I got to do the F in post-game show. I think that was the actual line. And it's like, well, yeah, that's how everybody feels the day that their team gets knocked out. It's like, oh man, I got to sit here and watch this other team celebrate, or I got to like write the gamer or
break down the game that just happened that just kicked us out of the postseason.
Yeah, because you want to keep going. I mean, I completely understand that as like
the Tigers
a true emotional moment.
They have some real decisions to make. I mean, there's a lot of like, oh, you got to lock up Tarek Skubal, hometown, you got to, he's the homegrown, he's the Detroit Tiger, but it's like he might get one of the biggest or the biggest pitching contract ever, and it, you have to ask yourself the question if like that's something that Scott Harris in this front office is going to do, and it's not really a question about like homegrown or the face of the franchise at that point. It's how do you philosophically as a front office feel about 8 years and $250 million to a starting pitcher?
Sounds like a bargain to me, but it's not my money. And that is a topic we will wrestle with for maybe the next year, depending on how they decide to play it. I mean, offering an extension possibility, we've talked about that before, but we'll get into what the Tigers might be able to do this winter with Cody Stavenhagen at some point in the near future. Now it is our pleasure to be joined by Dominic Cotroneo. You've heard his voice on WTMJ pregame, postgame shows. If you listen to Brewers Radio or you watch Brewers games, FanDuel Sports Network Wisconsin, you'll see him on there as well. He's behind the scenes for all the Turner broadcasts, providing stats. I think you're kind of the brains behind the operation, really, with everything. With BA, Jeff Levering, like that's a great crew, but I think you're elevating those guys on a pretty regular basis, man.
We got some great producers. I know how to click on some websites. Don't fluff me a little too much here. I listen to you guys. Like let's. This is a team effort. I'm being the Brewers. Like, no, it's all about all of us. So, but appreciate the kind words, DVR.
Well, we're glad to have you here, and having a chance to talk about the Game 5 yet that even sent the Brewers into the NLCS, and Trevor McGill worked as the opener in that game. I think we took a few stabs at what the Brewers might do. We didn't even throw that dart, and it worked out really well. It was the first game in the series in which the Brewers kept the Cubs off the board in the first inning, so that was kind of a relief from my chair watching that game. And then we saw Jacob Mizorowski for 4 innings. Other than a Seiyu Suzuki homer, it was a fantastic outing from the Miz, but a very different outing because he really dialed back that fastball usage.
Exactly. That's the biggest thing that jumps out to me, that you look at his usage rate of the fastball and his best starts or appearances, I should say now, because Game 2 is included in this too. Like the 3 best outings he had are Game 5, Game 2, and that 12 strikeout start against the Dodgers. And those are the 3 lowest fastball usages of his season. And that was the biggest surprise to me after that game in July. And my reaction to all of that was, we've heard so much about the 102. We've heard so much about the velo and will he command it? And it's kind of ironic that if you remember that July game, Shohei took him deep on the first at-bat of the game and then settled down and locked it in and got 6 innings, gives up a homer first at-bat to Suzuki in Game 5, settles down, gets through 4. And when you see him trusting the slider cutter thing, this amazing 96 mile an hour cutter slider, whatever. I know he calls it a slider. It behaves like a cutter. And he's commanding that. It's funny that it's not necessarily a swing and miss pitch, but it just gets them off the scent of 101. And I think that we're seeing him, to use the cliche, pitch again is what's so exciting to me.
Yeah, in that game, he only got one whiff on the thing.
Yeah.
Slider cutter thing. And he pretty much pitched backwards, The four-seam fastball got the 5 whiffs, and the curveball got 3 whiffs on 6 pitches. So, it's amazing. It's great. It's not, my comp for him early on was, Jacob deGrom, but it's Jacob deGrom without the fastball command. So I guess this is what maybe Jacob deGrom would do with his 95 mile an hour slider if he didn't have the same command on his fastball. So I love watching pitchers like grow and figure themselves out, in front of you. And we get so much information every 5 days, every time we see them. It's so different from hitting, which is like, it's an everyday process, So love that the Miz did that. And, what do you see, do you see them, going with the opener, going forward? Like, do you think that's a thing about comfort, or is it about length, or what is it? Because I think he has all the opportunity, all the tools to dominate, and it sometimes surprises me that they just don't put Mizrowski in the first and go as long as he can go.
I think the reason they like it this way is there's a little bit of mind games going on here with Miz. Obviously, he's a rookie, and the list of young contributors on this Brewers team is really long. But I thought it was really telling as we were talking to him after Game 5. We're all making our assumptions, like, is Quintana going to get in this game? Is Miz going to get in this game? Are they going to get more than 9 batters face? Like, that was kind of like, we knew it was going to be chaos a la the Tigers of last season. But the fact that he got 4 innings was massive. And we asked Miz after, like, did you expect to get in this game? They didn't tell me bleep is his quote to us.
Whoa.
The fact is, and like he did that with a smile and a tongue in cheek of just like, the bullpen phone rang in the first inning and they said, Miz, get hot. And the rest is history. So it's a little bit of mind games of like, hey, you don't got to sit on, are you going to pitch in this game all day? He knew he was going to be available and pitch in some capacity. But I thought that was just brilliant to say, don't think too hard, go out, pitch, do your thing. And it's really good. Keep it simple, stupid,
Yeah, answer the phone.
Yeah, and I think that's been the story for this Brewers team so far in the postseason, but even throughout the year. It is a kind of all hands on deck sort of approach. It's a mentality that Pat Murphy and the coaching staff have really, I think, built really effectively. I think about Chad Patrick as sort of the X factor in the series, though, right? I mean, he helped Aaron Ashby get out of a jam in Game 5, 2 on and nobody out. Ashby himself actually helped the cause by striking out Kyle Tucker. But Chad Patrick, it seems like something's a little different about him. When we saw him at the beginning of the year, it was really a 3 fastball sort of approach. Did he throw slurves? Like that's what StatCast had it down as. They had him down as slurves. Where did that pitch come from? And having the extra ticks in the bullpens obviously helped him so far. How important do you think Chad Patrick is going to be, kind of looking ahead to the NLCS based on the usage we've seen to this point?
Yeah, I was talking to him about that pitch at the end of September. So backtrack. Remember, Chad Patrick was International League, Triple Crown winner last year. And the way that the Brewers knew he was going to be important this season, they had put him on the 40-man for Rule 5 protection. But then all of a sudden, with the late injuries in spring training and Woodruff not being ready, that they needed him on the opening day roster. And they did not expect that. He pitched at Yankee Stadium. And then he's the guy that actually started the first win of the season for the Brewers, worked into the 6th inning while battling the flu, mind you. And the team realized, okay, there's something about this guy, and couldn't quite put their finger on it. Dude's from middle of nowhere, Indiana, Northwest Indiana, Notre Dame fan, like just sort of, hey, I didn't come from much in Hebron, Indiana, and I'm ready to go out there and shove. And even when the only reason he got demoted in July was because of the return of Brandon Woodruff, right? He was a legitimate Rookie of the Year candidate, but the Brewers, you're going to tell Brandon Woodruff thanks, but no thanks. So that's the kind of where he got lost in the public eye. He goes down to AAA, learns this slurve that you're talking about. He calls it a curveball through AAA pitching coach Justin Message. And he's also the guy that got Jacob Mizrowski on the water bag and the routine that Paul Skeens does. You remember Message was with the Pirates a season ago. So all this is to say, Chad Patrick is probably, we're not supposed to play favorites, my favorite pitcher on this team, just because like the glove side cutter command is beautiful. He wears number 35, 39. He's got a little flow in the back. We all know what that looks like. That backdoor cutter to Ian Happ is going to be hung in the Brewers Museum for years to come because that looked a lot like another 39 that's been here in Milwaukee.
That's going to get people really excited because I think on this show, we've had a little more of that early season. Like there's something here. We can't quite figure out what it is sort of read on Patrick and even his long-term role. He looks so good in this relief role. You could say, oh, maybe he's a high leverage guy for them next year. But given that he's pitched so much as a starter and had so much success, there's probably a path for him to at least try to start again in 2026 and beyond.
And the velo's up too. I mean, naturally, right? You expect that in the postseason. 97 is a number that he'd never really hit. He hit 98 in a couple bullpens, he told me. So he's fired up about seeing that radar gun light up. And I'm like, 98 with movement, sign me up.
Yeah, that'll work.
The curveball arrived on Stuff Plus scene like sometime in August, beginning of September.
Late August.
Yeah. And it's Stuff Plus, the model really likes it from a stuff angle. I guess the command on it is inconsistent. It being a new pitch, maybe that's a really big step forward for Patrick next year if he's going to start, because I always thought of him as like very Triforce heavy, fastball, cutter, sinker, and kind of looking for a secondary that matched the quality of those fastballs. But if it is the slurve, that is possibly something he could use against both sides, especially since he can use the cutter as an out pitch as well. So, I mean, I think he's got all the tools he needs, and they get to use him as a reliever right now when they need him. They need one more reliever, and I'm excited to see him still as a starter next year.
Yeah.
But who else do you think is a key? Like how are they going to pitch games that are not Mizorowski and Peralta? Like what are some of the plans there?
I think tonight we'll kind of look into the mind of Pat Murphy and Chris Hook, pitching coach, of just we're expecting an opener. They have not announced it at the time of recording, but I think that the Phillies kind of laid it out. Granted, the Phillies had 3 legitimate lefty starters. The Brewers have 1 fringe with Jose Quintana, and Quintana, is pitched well in the DS in his role trying to hold the line against the Cubs, and he had the calf strain at the end of the year. He's fully healthy, but do they trust him more than 2 times through? Probably not. And even 2 times through is a lot, quite frankly. So do you open and keep throwing lefties at Ohtani and Freeman? And oh, by the way, I know Teo had the homer against Matt Strahm, but Teoscar Hernandez against lefties has been a story that he has not been his normal self against lefties really since June. So you maybe, it sounds crazy to say, like you're comfortable throwing a lefty at Teoscar Hernandez. That could burn me in about 48 hours. But the point being is, if you have Jared Koenig open the game, or if you have Aaron Ashby open the game and keep throwing lefties at the top of this Dodger order, make them prove that they can make the adjustment, because of the 20 plate appearances that Shohei had in the DS, 16 of them were against lefties, and it seemed like a pretty good strategy.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big part of this series. And as far as Ohtani pitching goes, we're going to see him at some point is where they've landed so far. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, make game 4 maybe. But Eno has pointed out that we don't always see Ohtani swing the bat as effectively when he pitches as when he's just DHing too. So maybe that's something that they're thinking about on the Dodgers side with their starting rotation healthy. And I think the Dodgers starting rotation is going to be a huge story. It's been the thing we've been talking about for weeks now. They got pretty much everybody healthy at the exact right time. It can take pressure off of a bullpen that's weaker than we're accustomed to. A lot of folks are pointing out the Brewers swept the season series, right? 6-0. And I think while we know the Dodgers were not completely healthy then, it wasn't like they were trotting out Ben Kasparius multiple times. It was 1 against Yamamoto, 2 against Kershaw, 2 against Glasnow, and 1 against Emmett Sheehan, right? So yeah, you didn't see Snell. Ohtani wasn't pitching then, and Roki Sasaki didn't have his current role. So the pitching is different, but they didn't beat up on the B and C Dodgers pitchers either. So I guess my question is, how do you see the Brewers bats putting enough pressure on this rotation to at least get a few cracks at some of the relievers that the Dodgers were mostly able to hide in that DS matchup against the Phillies.
Yeah, that's the big thing, I think, for the Brewers to win this series, right? Is that they need to find a way to drive up pitch counts. Now, we may sit and look at the end of this series and the starter ERA for the Dodgers is like a 1.5. And you're like, what do you mean the starters dominated this series? But if you can get them out before the end of the sixth inning, I think the entire series changes because they're going to have to get a third time through the order. Dave Roberts knows that. He needs to use his best a third time through because he has this underbelly that he's worried about of, can he trust Blake Trinan? Can he make sure he doesn't overuse Alex Vezia? Is somebody else going to step up like Jack Dreyer? Is somebody else going to step up like Justin Robleski? Like, you need to have somebody to support. And quietly, like Tanner Scott, I know he was brutal in September. This would have been the role for him, the closer for the starter. He wasn't getting the ninth inning after what Roki did here at the end of the year. So yes, I think that's the game plan for the Brewers. Even if they only get one run across against Snell and Yamamoto and those guys, if they can get them out before the end of the sixth inning, they understand it's going to be a hard task against those starters. The sooner they can force Roberts' hand in that bullpen where they'll have the advantage because they beat up on Trinan. They beat up on Yates, who's obviously not on the roster right now. They've seen what the Dodgers have at their best. And quite frankly, I think the Brewers are that perfect little matchup to say, okay, don't chase, don't swing. They'll be pests. They'll run the bases. Like we've talked about this all season long. And the Dodgers are well aware they're going to have to challenge the status quo of that third time through for their starter.
Yeah, for me, one of the fascinating things on the bat side for Milwaukee is just what is their true talent power level? Because we can look at full season numbers and we can say, I love the above average Joe's, meme that's been born, but and they are above average in almost every facet of the game. But if just honestly, over the course of the season, they were not above average in power. If you look at isolated slugging or any of the StatCast metrics, if you look at the second half of the season, after they get Andrew Vaughn, they get a little bit closer, but it's still like the 17th best ISO, Then you look at the postseason and they have the second best isolated slugging in the postseason. And when I click on who's doing it, it's Andrew Vaughn. It's William Contreras, who was hurt all year, and it's Jackson Churio, who had a really up and down season. I think he's a little bit streaky. He's a young hitter. There were some physical things to him. Like what, if you were going to just assess this team right now, would you give them an above average power grade as a team?
I would if we're going like a WRC style, 100, if we're just doing like slug, I mean, it's like a 105 if we're going to put a marker on it. Like it's above average. It's not like a 120. But it's
probably the worst slugging of the last four that are in there, but it's still above average. Yeah,
it's enough. I think it's just enough.
It's just enough. Exactly. And you look at this lineup and Contreras being healthy enough, right? Mm-hmm. And he hadn't hit a homer in over 140 plate appearances before that homer in game 2. And that was significant to find his power stroke again, because that's part of the reason Rhys Hoskins is not on this roster, because they trust Andrew Vaughn as their right-handed power. And for it to arrive in the DS was massive. You look at this lineup, Terang had the power surge in August, and it didn't sustain it in September, but then he hits 107, off Andrew Kittredge.
I cannot believe that what? Like,
where he hit that out and how hard he hit it doesn't, nothing about that homer made sense.
Talking to Bryce all season long, and I tell you what, everyone asks who's your favorite guy to watch during batting practice? And for a long time, it was Christian Yelich, because he sends it. Now it's Bryce Terang, because he's always had that power. And even in high school, he was telling me, it's like, I had pull side pop, but I thought I was helping myself by showing the ability to go the opposite field. I always had pop to straightaway center and a pull side. Now that he's showing off backside pop, and I thought Pat Murphy had a great quote after Terang hit an opposite field homer at Wrigley in August. And it was like 10 rows deep, and it was a shot. Wind was not blowing out that day. And Murph said it great, and I tread lightly with the name, but there's Barry Bonds told Pat Murphy years ago, hey, any lefty can go pull side. It takes talent to go oppo, to go backside. And Bryce Terang's got that ability.
I think that's going to be big for them in the series too, because until that Game 5 homer, Terang was really quiet at that prominent spot in the lineup. And I think when you look at the bottom three for the Brewers lineup, it's Durbin, Perkins, Ortiz. It's a little weaker than what you'd like to see offensively, but those guys get opportunities. They do make contact. Maybe they can at least be part of the plan to pile up high pitch counts on those starters. You never know. You just never know when a combination of those guys are going to string them together.
That was my point.
Yeah, that's the big thing they didn't get in the first series too.
Yeah, Yelly had some quality ABs, got on base a little bit, but didn't really have the slug that you would hope out of Yelly, given it's his first healthy postseason in a long time for him. Remember, he wasn't in the postseason last year for the Brewers. And, here's a mind-blowing stat for you as well, that Christian Yelich doesn't have a postseason RBI since Game 7 of the NLCS 2018, the leadoff homer he hit in 2018. He hasn't had a postseason RBI since then. So that needs to change if the Brewers are going to win this series. You got to ride your stars. And, Dave Roberts has talked about Shohei needs to get going offensively. They're not going to survive a series if he goes 1 for 16 again, especially in a 7 game. And the Brewers aren't going to survive if Christian Yelich doesn't have an RBI in this NLCS either.
I don't think I've felt as good in that ballpark since Yelly hit that homer. At that moment, I thought they were going to the World Series. Like, I was there. I was as happy as I've ever been in that ballpark, because I didn't get to go to games this year. I'm going to try to get to a World Series game if they get there, or an LCS game. Man, like that, the heart, that just brought back joy and then heartbreak simultaneously.
Or Granderson's ball at the wall.
Yeah. That whole game, I can't go back and rewatch it now. Maybe after they climb the mountaintop someday, I'll go back and watch Game 7 of the 2018 NLCS again. Hopefully we don't think about that one again for a while. Last question for you, Dom, before we let you go. Is there anything else about this team that folks that didn't get a chance to watch them all day should know? Something they just may have completely overlooked, or they just don't think about, because so much of the narrative is the Dodgers, the team that has everything, the Brewers, the small market, scrappy team. But I feel like that's kind of unfair to both sides, especially the Brewers, given the regular season they put together.
I look at the thing that blew my mind about Game 5 of the DS is the homegrown talent that was on display in that game, and the organizational success of an example that game was, right? You open it with Trevor McGill, who was DFA'd by the Cubs a couple of years ago, and by the Twins. Like, he was a nomad, and like, oh man, this is not going well. And now he's, an all-star closer. Then you go to the Miz, this skinny kid out of Crowder College, out of JUCO, a COVID sign, and to develop him and trust that the raw stuff was going to get there. Then you hand it to Aaron Ashby, another homegrown.
So he was undrafted in that 2020 season?
Well, he was supposed to go to Oklahoma State. Scholarship, everything got wonky because of 2020. So he goes to Crowder College instead. Then the Brewers draft him. So it all worked out in that fashion. Ashby, homegrown draft pick. Chad Patrick, acquired for Abraham Toro a couple of years ago as he was a minor leaguer. And then you hand it to Abner Uribe, international, homegrown. I think, and then Caleb Durbin, identifying him, getting on base 3 times, playing good defense at third. Bryce Terang, homegrown, hitting the homer. Andrew Vaughn, a trade in the middle of the year that everyone laughed at. Like, organizational success, it's not by accident. And I'm sick of the narrative that the Brewers don't use analytics. They play the game the old-fashioned way. Like, they're one of the dumbest thing I've ever heard. They're one of the best advanced analytics teams in the game. None of this 100%. Is just by... And Murph understands it completely. People are shortchanging Murph's knowledge of the game and the advanced stuff because he is fascinated by that. You can get him going on some of those subjects. So I think that the Brewers, yes, we can talk about them being underdogs, David, all this stuff. I think it sort of discredits best team in baseball, home field advantage. Yes, we can talk about the slug all we want. They led virtually every other category in the National League. So this is a really, really good offense. And oh, by the way, the bullpen has been phenomenal so far.
You want to drop a prediction?
I've been saying since February the Brewers are winning the pennant. So I am going to stick with Brewers in 7. I've been saying all year, it's hard to improve. 92 wins a season ago? They improved with 97 wins. It's hard to improve on a 92-win team that won the division. They did it anyway. I still believe in this team. I got Brewers in 7.
I love your faith, Dom. I hope you're right. Hope I'll be there at Game 7 watching them get it done. We appreciate your time and your insight. We'll look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Big fan of the show, guys. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dom. It's Dominic Cotroneo. You hear him on the pre-post game show, WTMJ, contributing nuggets on FanDuel Sports Network Wisconsin all season, part of the broadcast in the postseason through TBS and the regular season too. We love having him join us. All right, now it is our pleasure to be joined by Sahadev Sharma, one of our great beat writers covering the Cubs here at The Athletic. We talked about the Brewers getting through that NLDS series in 5 against the Cubs, and it was a battle. I mean, Sahadev, these two teams, I feel like they're as close as they've been in a long time, and if this one went 7, I could have been a nail biter in 7 too, right? Like there was no reason to believe that wasn't going to be airtight the longer the series went, but the big story for me with the Cubs over the course of the season is that the bats faded, right? In the first half of the season, Pete Crow Armstrong looked like an MVP candidate. As a lineup, they were tied for second in WRC plus with the Dodgers. The second half, they were just a tick above average, like a 102 WRC plus as a team. And the Brewers managed to keep them in check, leaning really heavily on a cast of relievers throughout the NLDS. So what really changed for those Cubs bats over the course of this season?
Yeah, I think there were a couple things that happened. First of all, Kyle Tucker just was not himself in the second half, whether that was the hand injury, eventually the calf injury. That's not really clear what caused it because he got injured in the beginning of June. Go look at his June numbers, and they're his best month offensively. He was great in June. And then something just happened in July. There's theories that maybe he was compensating for that injury and it threw off his mechanics. He does have kind of a unique swing. And if it's one of those, like, you have to constantly maintain it. If it's thrown off, it's going to cause problems. Maybe that happened. That is a theory that some of the people within the organization have thrown around. And Pete Crow Armstrong was not the player he was in the first half. I think that is a fair question going forward. What type of offensive player is Pete Crow Armstrong? He set this insane standard in the first half, and now expectations are he has to match that. It's kind of unfair. I know I have to reset my expectations because he did it for so long, for multiple months in a row, that it's like, is this who he is? Because that is an MVP. That is, with his defense, with his base running, that's just a really rare player. He's still a very good offensive player. I haven't looked at the second half numbers. I would guess they're not very good overall. There was a stretch there where it was rough, and he needs to figure that out. He needs to figure out how to mentally grind through those moments and find some value. He's not going to be a guy that walks, and I think that's going to lead to this is kind of what Pete Crow Armstrong career will be. A huge upswings, huge downswings. That may just be who he is, but he's still so valuable because of what he gives on defense. The rest of the offense, like Carson Kelly was, they joked it was like Babe Ruth in April. That was not going to happen. And he was still pretty solid. He had some really good stretches in the second half, but he just couldn't keep up that April pace. The rest of the guys like Matt Shaw, rookie, so up and down, typical rookie season. Seiya had this long stretch where he just wasn't performing. Michael Busch even had a downswing in the second half. I think those two guys are guys that I feel really good about after the way they bounced back, especially Michael Busch. I think Michael Busch may be the best bat next year, or the one you feel most comfortable about in that lineup, depending on how their offseason goes. But yeah, it was not as good. And I felt like while the run scoring wasn't there down the stretch, there was a game in Atlanta that it was the worst performance I felt they had. And then after that, they just seemed to be grinding pitchers again. They couldn't carry that over into the postseason enough. Postseason's a different animal. Pitching is what rules in the postseason. You watch all these games, and the reason the Cubs lost that series is because of game 1 and 2, really, in my opinion. I know it went to 5, but game 1 and 2, you didn't pitch well enough. You just didn't. And that's what cost you the series. The offense it just feels like grinding out runs is how offense works in the postseason. You can have as talented an offensive lineup as possible, and it still ends up being like you need to find a way to get to 2 or 3 runs and then just throw all your pitchers at them.
Yeah, I think Seiya's a good heartbeat though for this team too. I mean, you mentioned Bush, but he is the grinder too. He's the guy who always takes good at bats, and the power goes and comes a little bit, but he's always taking good at bats, and so he's back. And I think a lot of the heartbeat of this team is back, and there's just these 2 big names, and I'm looking at the MLB trade rumors projected arbitration numbers. There's not that much going on there for the Cubs. And looking at what they've spent last year and what they spent, what they have on and it looks like they may have $60-70 million to spend, without really pushing past where they were this past season. Do you think they spend it on Kyle Tucker? I mean, after that season, they don't seem to be the kind of team that they're okay with long deals, but they haven't been at the trough for like the $300 million deal. And I wonder if Tucker goes for that, if they're just out because they're philosophically sort of against the $300 million deal.
Yeah. So first of all, I don't know what Kyle Tucker is going to get. I don't, once Vlad signed that deal, I think a lot of people were getting crazy numbers in their head. I don't think he may not get something that starts with a 3. He's certainly not getting something that starts with a 4. It was a hot topic towards the end of the season and in the postseason, kind of talking to executives all around baseball. People, there were a lot of scouts that were coming by, obviously, to watch the Cubs and anybody that they were playing. So that a lot of people around baseball are wondering that, and it doesn't sound like people don't think he's going to get 400. I think that's kind of
he doesn't really have the elite bat speed. He's had good outcomes, but the bat speed doesn't match the outcomes somehow.
Yeah, and then you is he getting to that point where he's a little old? He's not old, obviously, but he's had a couple seasons now with multiple injuries.
Yeah,
that's going to creep into front offices' minds. It just he was the man here with the Cubs. How did he handle that? How did that go? I thought it went fine for the first half, and then the second half, doubts creep into your mind. I don't know. He played through injury at first, and then he didn't play through the calf injury. All these different factors are going to be considered. I just don't see how he comes back to the Cubs, because I don't. Here's the best scenario for him coming back to the Cubs. He decides he wants one of those Cody Bellinger type deals where he can opt out, build his value back up. I don't think there's been no sign of him wanting to do that. I think he's going to get like a $250, close to $300 million deal from somebody. But just let's pretend that he wants that. Why would he choose the Cubs? Wrigley Field is not fun for left-handed power hitters. It just isn't. Michael Busch is a rare breed right now. He gets a lot of credit for doing what he did as a lefty at Wrigley Field. There's a reason Cody Bellinger is happier with the Yankees and is opting out now of his contract. That's a great place to play for a left-handed hitter. It just is. And Kyle Tucker, if he's smart and if his agency is smart, which I'm sure they are, if they want that type of deal, Wrigley Field is not the place to go. It's 2 years in a row now. I don't know if that's really weird, bad luck of the wind just more often than not blowing in. And I haven't done enough research to know if when I'm on the road with the team, covering the team, the wind's actually blowing out. And this is just weird randomness of the world, or if something has changed and the configuration of the park with the video boards has had more of an impact than expected. I have a theory that below the press box, it used to be open. It used to be open air and the wind could come through. Now that's closed off with a suite that they built. That I think all these little factors and the weather is changing in Chicago. It's not how it used to be. I've lived in this area my entire life, and the weather is different than it used to be. We have an actual fall right now. It's very odd. It's not something we're used to in this city. So those are all reasons why I don't think he'd take like some sort of pillow contract or whatever. I don't even really think he'd do that. I just don't see it happening. You're right. This front office is very, very strict with their their finances, very thoughtful about their finances. And I do believe that if they were given more of a payroll, they would be a little bit more aggressive with these types of things. The ownership just doesn't want to be the Mets or the Dodgers or the Yankees, or even the Padres or the Phillies.
Yeah, but even just going back to where they have some pocket change. So if it's not Tucker, I'm kind of looking through it, and there is a left-hander on the market.
There is.
Where I'm going with this already. Kyle Schwarber reunion.
I think it makes a little sense. I don't know what
because
the
it'd
number
be a shorter deal, right? It'd be a shorter deal, and he has the bat speed, and
you know what? He in that clubhouse Saturday night, it was telling, the way there's some guys in there that just it broke them to lose. They're very upset and they take it to heart, and you see it. And everyone handles these things differently. I've been in a lot of losing clubhouses over the years, and everyone handles it differently. But Nico Horner, the way it hit him was something that could affect you as a person interviewing that guy. It's like, okay, I got to stop asking questions because you're making me sad. And I think Schwarber would fit in. Schwarber, wants to win.
He's a guy who's won here.
Yeah, he's won. First of all, the fans would love him. Second of all, I think his personality really works for the Cubs. I think it's a long shot. I just do. I think maybe he wants to stay in Philly. He's really happy there. I don't know. I should have, but I didn't ask anyone around the Cubs what their thoughts are on that. I'll get to it in the offseason, but I think it's a long shot. I do think he's a good fit. I just don't see it happening. I could see them revisiting the Bregman thing and shifting things around. Maybe finding, trying to trade using Matt Shaw to get a power arm in the rotation. These are just things I'm throwing around. I do think they have money to spend. I do not think they will be a top 10 payroll or top 5 payroll. Maybe they creep into the top 10 again just because other teams drop. But they're not a top 5 payroll team anymore. That's not what ownership wants to do. They're kind of have a foot on both sides of the line. We can spend big because we're the most in the NL Central, but we also want to behave like Cleveland and Tampa Bay and Milwaukee and be really smart. And if they're going to do that, I think there are some people that are you can't do both. You can in one sense, but if you're not going to really leverage your money, then you have to start acting like Milwaukee, really acting like Milwaukee. And what is Milwaukee going to do? Whenever they're eliminated, Freddie Peralta's on the trade market, right? Nobody would be surprised if that happens. These guys that are 5+, they get traded in places like Tampa. In Tampa, it's even earlier, but in places like Milwaukee, Cleveland, you're trading guys when they're 5+. So do the Cubs start doing that? Is that something that the Cubs have to start considering if they're not going to really lean into their finances?
That Travis Sawchik, speaking of the finances, Travis Sawchik, I think he has a thing where it's payroll is a percentage of income, and the Cubs are tied with Pirates.
Yeah, it's bad. Look, I can tell you they don't love that chart.
They probably think it's not right, and they'll tell you
they feel it's misleading. They feel it's misleading. There's things that aren't counted in there. Look, they have their reasons and their excuses. The reality is they don't spend like the Cubs should spend. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. Whether that's accurate or not, that exact chart, they'll dispute that, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. They are not a top five payroll. And I don't think any of us would disagree that they should be. They should be a top 5 payroll. Why aren't they? It's their choice.
Right.
I'm trying not to cackle into my microphone because I'm thinking about the Cubs front office acting like Wes Mantooth defending the ratings and Anchorman. Those don't account for houses with 2 television sets and other things like that. It's I don't think those numbers are totally cooked out of thin air. I think there's actually a lot of truth in them, and that's just the way they choose to operate. But I think part of that problem, if you're not leveraging your money, is the roster's only so big, and if you live in that second tier, you are a little bit short on top end talent, and you also have filled the roster in a way where you're not developing enough players because you've got guys you have to play. So I do think there is an actual logjam you can create trying to have your cake and eat it too as a bigger market team that doesn't spend like a biggest market team, but then also wants to have the elements that make some of the more successful small market teams function the way they do. The pitching. Shota Imanaga, like this is a weird year too. The strikeout rate came down. He wasn't healthy. I thought we were going to see him at least as much as we saw Colin Ray in Game 5. That didn't happen, and this was a weird year overall for him. Yeah, the velo drop, and he wasn't effective in Game 2.
Does he opt out? He has a $15 million option.
So it's a complicated thing. The Cubs have an option to change it to 2 more years, I believe, on his deal. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it would be in the 20-ish million range, I believe. Maybe more than that, maybe 25-ish million, something like that. Or if they don't pick that up, then he can either become a free agent or pick up a $15 million 1-year option. So I think it is a legitimate question on all sides. I think I could see any of those things, like anything happening there, because you're right, like the velo drop, the stuff drop. I think the confidence was dinged. I think that's a big reason why he didn't pitch in that Game 5. I do think the stuff was starting to look a little bit better again, and then he was losing his confidence. He couldn't command the splitter in particular. He was leaving the fastball in areas that you just can't leave that velocity fastball at. Like, it's a good fastball. Ignore the velocity. It's a good fastball.
Like shape-wise,
yeah. But he was leaving it over the heart of the plate, and he couldn't do that. Just leaving too many pitches, and I think it got in his head, and like he was struggling to kind of like fight through those moments. I don't know what happens there. I think it's a huge question, and I think it's probably one of the things we get, like that we have to figure out first before we decide really see how their offseason goes. I do think pitching is number 1 on their list of here's how we get better next year. But I think they need more swing and miss. I think he was that guy in year 1. In year 2, not as much. There were flashes of it when he came back from injury. It was like, oh, here are those strikeouts again. And then the home runs just really shot up in that final month. Obviously a huge issue in the postseason as well.
Yeah, that contract situation is one of the more intriguing ones to watch, just in terms of it creating a possible hole for the Cubs, but also opening up even more money to spend potentially if it ends up being a Cubs decline and then he turns down his player option to go back into free agency.
I think theoretically, he's at least a 1 through 4. I mean, he's at least like a 3 or a 4, even if he's not a 1. And I think theoretically you'd be happy to sign like a 3 or 4 for 2 years and $50 million. If I'm reading right. Yeah, I don't have that contract in front of me. I know it's complicated, but if it's something like that, I think he'll be back, but I think they may want to do something on top of that,
Yes.
Like somebody else as well.
Almost certainly. It's going to be hard to find that guy or acquire that guy, right? It's not always easy to do these things, but I do believe their priority is add another, no doubt, 1 through 3 type starting pitcher. Preferably someone that gets a lot of swing and miss.
Either. He's like a 3.5.
Right. He pitched like a 2 in year 1 and pitched like a 4 in year 2.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's, so what is he? Probably somewhere in between.
Right.
I just don't, I think they have to go out and get swing and miss. I think they need to figure out how to get another starter. They were so close to acquiring Jesus Luzardo. I think he would have answered a lot of questions for them.
Yeah.
I don't like. I like the idea of revisiting Joe Ryan. They tried to acquire him. The prices were insane. It probably is good that they didn't acquire Mackenzie Gore as far as the cost was on him.
I always put them in Edward Cabrera pants. Was that ever real? Were they talking?
They love. There are people in that organization that love Edward Cabrera. I think that's something else they could revisit. Just the Marlins in general. What are the Marlins doing? But certainly, that I think getting a swing and miss starter is a priority. Guys, I'm going to let my dog out real quickly. I can hear you, so keep asking
I think we got to
questions.
wrap it up. We got to wrap it up.
Yeah. The doggos, they're on their own schedule. And you know, I respect that. They tell you what they want.
She's sitting there barking, like quietly barking, respectfully barking. But I just
that's the door bark.
They just pick it up a little bit. You get the woof. And then after about 3 or 4 of those, like, all right, no, I really want to get out of here. I'm done. Sahadev, we appreciate your time and your insight. Looking forward to reading your coverage throughout the offseason because it's a big one for the Cubs.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you. That's Sahadev Sharma from The Athletic, one of our great Cubs beat writers here. All right, we got Dom's prediction, Brewers in 7, which he's been on the Brewers winning the pennant since February, which I respect that. Like, he's been on that the entire time. I've been wrong about just about everything up until the playoffs. I thought heartbreak was on tap for the Brewers, even though I expected the Phillies to get through the Dodgers. I'm going to stick with the core of that projection. I think it's Dodgers in 6, even though I see the paths for the Brewers to make this a really interesting series and to possibly win it. But I think it's that starting pitching quality for the Dodgers. They're all healthy right now, and I think that's just enough to be the big difference maker in the series.
I think I might be over.
Again, we're not going to roll the tape, so we're gonna just let you wonder about that.
I must have gotten some of the wild card ones right. I mean, there's so many of them. I must have gotten at least 1 or 2 right.
Trying to think
I
which
called
one
the
you
Yankees through.
You had the Tigers.
I called the Yankees through
Guardians.
when they were down.
You had the Yankees over the Red
was a good
Sox,
one.
and you had the Tigers over the Guardians. I think you went 2 for 4 in the opening round.
Phew. Well, I went with the Dodgers on the site. I'm going to stick with that one. My thinking is just that this is actually a really good rotation. And I think the Roki thing has answered a huge question for them. And I think that, they did not hit that well in that Phillies matchup. I just don't think you keep this lineup down that long. This is the kind of lineup that finds any crack they can find and gets through it. So I think that the superior power in the rotation and the lineup is, I hate to get, people are like, oh, your power over contact. You only care about power. That's not true. I mean, if you give me 2 guys who have the same amount of power and one strikes out less, I'll take that. But that's not what we were talking about here. We're talking about a team that has more power. And in that case, I think that's where I gravitate.
Yeah, I think for me, I've got the confidence in the Brewers pitching plan being effective enough to keep the Dodgers from multiple boat race scenarios, but I just think it's going to be getting runs across in those first 5 or 6 innings, like Dom said. Getting those starters out, ideally before the end of the 6th, is going to be really important if the Brewers are going to find a way to get to that bullpen. And
I slightly disagree with you too about, you were saying that they in the 6 regular season games that wasn't the B team, but like you did list 3 starts of pitchers that will not start against them in this.
Well, in the sense that like Emmett Sheehan is still on the playoff roster and important, right? Like you got Kershaw in his swan song year, so if you want to pick nits there for sure. Like it wasn't a joke of a Dodgers rotation.
No,
it was still a
but it also
good
wasn't
pitchers.
necessarily this team that they're going to see now.
No,
and
exactly.
I haven't found that much value in looking at head to head between teams.
It doesn't matter because everything changes. The game plans change. Some of the players change. Like
how you play the game changed. That was regular season games,
Right. But I do think the Brewers' core identity is a great defensive team, one that grinds out plate appearances and gets on base at a really high clip despite that average sort of power up and down the lineup as a group. It can work. Like it absolutely can work. For all the reasons people like the Blue Jays on the AL side, I think you can apply a lot of the same arguments on the Brewers side.
Right, and the difference also between the Brewers, the Blue Jays, and the Padres is the Padres had like bottom 5 power.
And worse defense than both of those teams, too.
Oh, yeah. But I just mean in terms of the relationship between power and contact, the Padres were really lacking, whereas the Blue Jays and Brewers are more like middle, upper middle. That's why I asked that question of Dom, because, if they're above average in the power department, then their contact superiority means more. You could see, even in the first game between the Blue Jays and Mariners. They made a lot of contact. They didn't strike out that much, but the balls in play weren't that effective.
I did see a nugget on the MLB.com series preview. This will be the 7th postseason series when one swept the regular season series. The last time it happened is 2015. The Cubs went 7-0 against the Mets in the regular season, but lost to the Mets in the NLCS. Which again, like you could grind out a series win. Also, it's
just 7 more games.
it's just not predictive. Like that's all. That's the main point. So anyway, I hope I'm wrong about my NLCS prediction.
Well, then you're glad that I picked
wrong.
the Dodgers.
Yes. Yes. I'm glad you're on my side here, given your track record. No, I haven't been perfect either. We are going to go on our way out the door. Quick thank you again to Dominic Cotroneo and Sahadev Sharma for joining us on this episode. You can join us in the Discord. Link is in the show description for that. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.